So this is the part we call the afterburn. So if you have a comment or a question, you're welcome to go ahead and raise your hand. If you're here locally, Steve will come around. If you're online, Manny's going back to help Kurt on the online desk. And we'll see what we can do to handle that. This is the time, though, on the live stream where things can sometimes get a little bit out of hand. So please, let's submit to the authority in the room, which is Kurt and Manny. And is Rob on there as well? No, okay. Okay, he's participating, but he's not admitting. Okay. All right, so then let them lead and let them take care of things. If anybody's out of hand, they'll put them in timeout or they'll bounce them out or whatever they need to do. But let's try to be respectful of the service that we're in. This is a Shabbat service. Okay, Amy, go ahead and get us started.
Thank you, Rabbi. I really appreciate yet another great teaching to help me each day try to walk this out. And I know I've said this before, it's been a while, but in Romans 13, when you were reading, I had heard, and you can tell me if this is correct, that word filled in verse 8 where it says, "Oh, no one any matter except to love one another, for he who loves another has filled the Torah." Could I put in there, that would bring life to the Torah? To say it, to think that way?
Where are you?
8, Romans 13:8.
13:8. Oh, no one any matter except to love one another, for he who loves another has fulfilled the purpose of the Torah.
Is that, can I think, bring life to? Yeah, okay.
In other words, if you're going to, as it says in 1 John, if you're not going to love one another, but you're going to hate your brother, you're not walking in the light. You're not walking in the Torah. You're undermining the whole process.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
I just want to make sure I think it right. Okay.
But people will read this and say, oh, well, as long as I love people, then I've done the Torah. I don't need to do the Torah. No, the Torah teaches you how to love one another.
Right, right. Okay, so when I was reading it in that manner, this was probably, a year or so ago, about, for me, if I do this, I would bring life to the Torah, and where it says love does no evil to a neighbor, therefore love is completion of the Torah. I thought, okay, that would bring life. I thought, oh, that word life. I go back to Devarim in chapter 8, where it says in verse 2 and 3. It says, "You shall remember that Yahweh, your Elohim, led you all the way these 40 years in the wilderness to humble you, prove you, and to know what is in your heart, whether you guard his commands or not. And he humbled you and let you suffer hunger and fed you with manna which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, to make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of Yahweh." And I thought that's what brings the life, is every word that comes from the mouth of Yahweh. And
those are good verses. I ought to use those sometimes.
Maybe you should think about it.
Yeah, Deuteronomy 8:2 and 3. Yeah.
So anyhow, when I thought about that, I'm a visual learner, so I just wanted to thank you because all these teachings that Yahweh gives you, that you take so much time with your skill to put together and give to us, show me what all this on paper looks like in action. So it's just basically a comment to thank you, Rabbi.
Amen.
So when I'm, out in this world on my own trying to figure out what to do or how to respond or how to act, all these teachings remind me of what the right thing is to do. So I just really wanted to thank you.
Amen. Appreciate that. Okay, I want to take something that you said, though. I think it's a really pretty picture, but I want to make it more clear, is that when you say the words bringing the Torah to life, in other words, you are showing what it looks like being lived. So Yeshua is the walking, talking Torah, meaning this is what Torah looks like when it's lived. So Torah is just words and commands and instructions, the teachings of Yahweh, until someone lives it. Now you're bringing life to the Torah. Okay? So think like you're animating it. Now this is what it looks like when it's being walked. Okay, Shira?
Wonderful teaching, Rabbi. I kind of had a feeling if you'd have saved those last few verses for a separate message, we would have gotten the Millennium and Kingdom 4.
No, you wouldn't have. No. Because it doesn't cover that part of the teaching.
You can't second guess the maestro.
No.
I have a couple things. I had a question, and I'm sure I've heard you answer this way back, but I'd love to hear your take on it once again. When you quoted from Matthew, Yeshua saying, "Depart from me, I never knew you," that passage always surprised me a little bit, because you expect him to say, "You didn't really know me. I never knew you." And then you were talking about 1 John 2:3 when he says we can know him, and several places in John's relational orientation, he's talking about us knowing him.
Right.
What's the balance between the two? I always wondered why Yeshua said to them, "I didn't know you."
All right. This is one of the lines I think Manny always liked. Look, it's not whether you think you have a relationship with him or not. It's whether he thinks he has a relationship with you that matters, okay? And so he's saying to them, you thought you had a relationship with me. He says, but I did not have that with you. So the reason he said it that way is because they were already convinced they had something they did not have. Okay, it was a one-sided relationship. Look, many a guy out there, and many a lady out there for that matter, when they were younger, or some of you are still young now, has had relationships in your heads with people that you ended up never actually dating or marrying or whatever, but in your head, you had a relationship. Okay? All right, because there was certain things that were going on that made you think, maybe you went and spent time together, maybe you even went out and ate together, whatever, but in your mind, there was more there than was really there. So in your head, it was one thing, and the other person's, it was a completely different thing. Okay? And so Yeshua is saying, look, I know you thought you had a relationship with me, but I didn't. Okay? Because that relationship is predicated on, if you love me, guard my commands. That relationship is predicated on the covenanting of Exodus 19. And so you were not in that relational parameter. You were not in the parameters that were required for the level of relationship. Okay? And so therefore, no, we didn't have the relationship you thought. So and then what John is saying is, if you do these things, you can feel confident that you have a relationship. Because he tells you that. He says, if you will take and obey everything I say, I will have a relationship with you as my chosen people. That's Exodus 19. He says that very clearly. So he tells you, you should have every confidence that you have a relationship if you actually understand what the scope of the requirements are to have a relationship. Okay? Young lady's dating a young guy. Says to the young guy, we are never going to have a relationship till you have a job. Guy keeps coming back and asking for a date. She says, do you have a job yet? No. Then why do you keep coming back? I gave you the parameters. You need to have a job. Do you understand what I'm saying? He knows what the parameters are, and yet he's going to keep going. Well, why are you not paying attention to the requirements? I said I would not go out with you till you have a job. I'm making this very simple. Okay? So then he goes and gets the job, and he comes back and says, now can I have a date? She says, yes, that was what I told you. You have a job, you can have a date. You understand what I'm trying to go? I'm making this simple. Yahweh says, I'm going to speak. You're going to submit to what I say, trusting me. If you do that, I will very gladly set you apart of all the nations and bless you with every abundant blessing there is. You can have that confidence, but you should also know, and you should know, whether you're doing those things or not. Just like the guy who didn't have the job should have known before he went back that he didn't have the job. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah,
now I get it. It's like, yeah, I've heard you say that a lot, but now I can connect it. Thank you. In John 15, my other comment was, you were talking about, how we have to stay in him. We have to stay in the light, walk in the light, stay on the path. And so just for a minute, I closed my eyes and I tried to imagine not wanting to stay on the path, and I couldn't imagine it. I couldn't even conceive of not wanting to stay in the path. I do trip at times, but the misery I feel when I do, it drives me right back to him. And so I had these thoughts of just praising him for his keeping power. I mean, it's such a mystery that we're walking in fear where it's really, not a done deal till it's the fat lady sings. No, I shouldn't say that. But it's not a done deal.
Is that in Revelation?
Yeah, somewhere. until he says it's done, until we're standing before him and we've finished our race. But in the balance of that, yeah, there's that place where you can be confident that you do have a hope. And that's a real mystery. Trying to figure that all out is beyond my mind. But some of the people that I enjoy really fellowshipping with have told me the same thing that I feel, is that the more we are committed to successfully become like Yeshua, and we begin over time to feel like parts of our flesh nature are really dropping away. We really don't have desires for those things anymore. And it's almost like you can feel, I don't know, I guess I just want to encourage, if everybody's starting out on this walk, if you push forward, it just becomes harder to leave. It's like your nature, a fish turning into a bird. And at some point, you just say, I'm going to die if I can't be a bird. If I can't be in Yeshua, life isn't even worth living. And so, like, for me to think about going back to ways that I've left behind, even last week, something I left behind, it could be years of struggle with it, but I'm just not going to give up the fight, because I can't imagine going back and being a fish and breathing water instead of air. So I just was praising him for his keeping power.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Look, when I did the Are You Saved teaching, I was accused of the original Are You Saved teaching. I was accused of being one of the most discouraging teachings, blah, 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 because I said, look, you really don't know until you get there, but you should have every confidence. And that's sort of a weird, dichotomy to have to deal with. But I want you to think about it like when you're dealing with a student or a child and they're doing a task, and you often say these words: it doesn't matter whether you succeed or fail or win or lose, as long as you tried your best. We tell that to children all the time. Just do your best, okay? And then it'll be what it'll be. You'll win, you'll come in second, whatever it is, if it's a contest, if it's a competition, whatever, but do your best. Did you do your best? Because they'll come to you sometimes, even when they're doing homework or something, I'm struggling and I'm failing. No, are you doing your best? Fine. Well, your best wasn't good enough at this moment, so now you're coming for guidance, and I can teach you, and now you'll be able to do other things. But the whole point is, you didn't really fail as long as you did your best. And I think Yahweh, that's how he grades things on the doing your best. He looks for utmost. He looks for best. He's not looking for perfect. Remember, Deuteronomy 8:2, which we quoted, says that he's looking to see whether it's in your heart. In other words, is your heart to put the full effort? Are you going to give it all? Okay, you'll make mistakes and you'll fall short in lots of different ways, but you should have every confidence that if you give it all, that you'll be fine. But all means that you keep trying to improve, that you keep trying to get better, you keep trying to become more Yeshua-like, etc. It doesn't mean, all right, I think I've arrived and I'm just going to, just mail it in the rest of the way, so to speak, okay? I'm just going to coast to the kingdom. No, it's an everyday effort, all the time thing. But if you're doing that, you should have every confidence, hey, I did it the best I could. I put every effort in. I put that utmost in, okay? And that means things that don't necessarily take a lot of physical effort. A lot of it's in the mind, the battlefield of the mind. But you got to put the effort in to win that battle, all right? The battlefield of the heart and the mind. Because that's what even John was talking a lot about, was the lusts, the eyes, the thoughts, the mind, the desires. This is all the battlefield. It's not all the hard physical things of it's so hard to physically do something. Because it really isn't hard to physically do these things, right? All right, who's next? Okay, live stream.
All right, let me know if these are repeats, since we've been watching the screen. But
Okay.
Aaron Murray, he couldn't give me a verse, but at some point you mentioned something about Yeshua was just a vessel. You want to know what that means?
No, I'm just saying, but the flesh suit was the vessel, is what I said, not Yeshua, okay? Okay, so the flesh suit was the vessel. I said, so, because we were talking about how, it talks about the eternal, the forever, and that the eternal put on a flesh suit, and the flesh suit died, not the eternal part. Okay, but the flesh suit was the vessel that he was able to show us in the flesh what things would look like to walk these things out. Okay? So not Yeshua being the vessel, but the flesh suit. Okay, go ahead.
All right, so Nancy says, Rabbi, how does one actually relinquish self-sovereignty? What actions make this happen?
We have paperwork for that. We can mail it to you. You just have to sign. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so you have to learn what submission is. Okay? The cure to sovereignty issues is submission. What is submission, though? Submission, and this is a hard one for everybody, submission does not, does not come into play until you disagree or don't like it. And that's when you know you have a sovereignty issue. Because when Yahweh says, and you don't want to, or you like something and you don't want to stop, or whatever it is, now you have to deal with your submission problem. And the submission problem is when sovereignties clash. Okay? Husbands and wives run into this all the time. Leadership in a congregational setting can run into this all the time. You at work can run into this on a regular basis. Sovereignties clash when submission is not properly in place. So someone in authority in your life, and in this case we're talking specifically about the creator of the universe, desires something that your desire clashes with. If you have a desire that clashes, that's the pride of life part. Now you have to recognize that that's a sovereignty clash, and that's when you have to decide, are you going to back and endorse your sovereignty, or are you going to get off the throne of your head, the kingdom of your head, and stop being king in your own world and give him that authority by submitting even though you don't like it? And this is for the guys and the ladies. Okay, ladies, don't worry, I will adjust the guys too, so don't get mad at me. But ladies, this is a lot of your struggle in your marriages. You do not want to submit, okay? And so, but he's, this and that, and he'll mess it up. That's yes or no. Maybe that's true or not. It doesn't matter, but you still don't want to submit, okay? Your relationship requires submission. In other words, when your sovereignties clash, you need to submit. Now, on the other side of it, men, you need to recognize the incredible responsibility of having that level of authority. And not just wield it willy-nilly and just impose it wherever you want and say, you need to submit. No, you need to be very careful and very sparing when you put that foot down. This is the problem on both sides. And that's where we have the sovereignty issues. Okay, on the one hand, ladies, you have a real trouble submitting to an authority. On the other hand, guys, you have a real hard time being a proper authority, which only makes for a perfect storm of why it doesn't work most of the time. Okay? Because we are lousy authorities, and ladies have a lousy time submitting to it, and the more lousy we are, the more they're having a hard time submitting to it. So if your wife is not submitting, recognize that part of it is your fault because you're probably not leading well. Part of it. Part of it is their fault because you don't have to be right for them to submit. I mean, they may be right. Ladies, you may be right, but he needs to learn the lesson of getting to be wrong. You're going to have to let him mess up. I know that's hard. All you blues out there freaking out. But something will go wrong. Yes, it will. But you'll survive it. But it was avoidable. That's the biggest problem to the blues. If it could have been anything, it's kind of like procrastination is anything you can put off to tomorrow, you should. Well, the blues have the other side of it, which is anything that should be avoided should be avoided. And if in retrospect something goes wrong and they figure out how it could have been avoided, they're going to be so mad at why somebody didn't avoid it. This should have been prevented. How could you let this happen? Stuff happens. Okay? Look, I'm going to say this tongue-in-cheek because I know my blue wife can handle this. But, it's just to give you an example, something simple. We're walking in a parking lot. My daughter's walking behind me about 8 feet. She trips and falls. My wife looks at me like, why didn't you catch her? Because I'm not Superman or Flash? I mean, by the time I saw her fall, she's already on the ground. But you see, that's the blue mindset, okay? that should have been prevented. Of course, she's also not understanding why my daughter didn't see the thing she tripped over. But I mean, all these things is all about why wasn't it prevented? But because sometimes stuff just happens. And then you wake up and realize, next time I'm in a parking lot, I may look a little bit more at what I'm stepping on and what I'm tripping over. I mean, you have to allow us to learn the lessons. So ladies, let the men learn some lessons. But men, recognize you have an unbelievable burden of responsibility to lead if you want them to submit. You don't just get to say, I'm the guy, they just got to submit. No, you need to figure out how to lead right while they're submitting. Okay? And don't do it brutishly and jerkishly and all that stuff. All right? That doesn't work. I have said this often, and men, you need to do this. You ask my wife, and she will tell you I am not lying. Okay, guys, give those ladies 100 yeses at least for every no. But ladies, if you get the 100 yeses, take the no. Okay? Okay, guys, don't just wield that no brutishly and like willy-nilly all over the place. Make it mean something. Okay, if you're going to put your foot down on something she doesn't like, doesn't want, and doesn't trust, be very, think long and hard about when to use it. Okay? Don't just say, I'm the guy, I can use it whenever I want. Okay? Think of it like a gun that doesn't have a lot of bullets, and you can't just replenish them all the time. You pull that, you don't get another one. Okay? Not for a while. I mean, you have to be careful. All right? You have a limited supply of these things if you do it right. I'm not saying go shoot your wife. Be careful with that. Okay? I'm just saying, think of having a limited supply of something. You can't just go and use it. All right? You understand what I'm saying? Because if you're trying to keep the family safe, okay, well, let me use the proper analogy. We'll go back to the gun and the bullets because now you'll make sense for it. If you pull it out to shoot the squirrel, what are you going to do when the bear comes? Do you understand what I'm saying? Because you already used your bullet. See, now I made it into a good analogy. Okay? Guys, you don't want to just pull that out and just shoot a little nothing. Because what if you really need it because you've already shot your bullet? Use them sparingly when only necessary. You need to say no, make sure it's because you really believe that it's necessary, because either if you don't, something bad's going to happen and you think so, and that you're trying to prevent, etc. Otherwise, you better give them 100 yeses. Okay, and you ask Robinson, she'll tell you, she gets the 100 yeses. Okay? All right? Now, the problem, though, ladies, if you get the 100 yeses, you get spoiled. And then you get the no, and now you don't know what to do. What do you mean, no? That no is coming. You need to be ready to say, I don't like it, I don't agree, but I'm going to take it. Yes, sweetheart, you make the decision. I appreciated all my 100 yeses up to this point. I'll give you the one no. Okay? All right, next.
All right. Sean Earls, if atonement for sins was a burnt offering, why wasn't Yeshua burnt on the cross, or am I missing something?
Yes, you're missing something. Okay? Because he's not a burnt offering. Sean, okay. I know what you're struggling with, Sean, and you need to pay attention very clearly. I'm not picking on you. I already mentioned this several times. Being willing to take a bullet for my brother is not the same as getting offered on an altar somewhere to a god. Okay? This is not a human sacrifice. This is a substitutionary redemption. Take me instead. All right? He was not killed on an altar. He was not killed in the temple because he wasn't a human sacrifice. All right? It wasn't a religious ceremony. Okay? I think I've already mentioned that a few times. But Sean, I know you're struggling with these things. This is not in contrast or against or contrary to Torah, where the Torah is against human sacrifice. He simply said, I'm willing to take me instead of them. Okay? That's all. Take me instead of them. All right?
All right, Libby, it's more of a comment. Rabbi, you spoke of Sadiq having good inclination. Made me think of the instructions to incline our ears and heart. So Sadiq's posture is one leaning into Yeshua, the Word.
Correct. Okay, it's Sadiq. Sadiq just means a righteous one. Or it's Sadiq. But when the Jews use it, they elevate it to the highest level. And by the way, a tzaddik doesn't mean he's a rabbi somewhere. A tzaddik could be the guy working in the bakery. Could be a guy, the mechanic who works on your car. He could be the doctor who's a surgeon. It could be anybody. Okay, the tzaddik is not in a position, generally speaking, teaching or instructing within the body. He's just somebody who has gotten to the place in their walk where they are not tempted to go against Yahweh. All right? And so we see this in Noah. Noah's a tzaddik. Okay, we see this in Job. I mean, Job, this is the whole contrast with Job. Okay, the enemy says to Yahweh, Hasatan says, well, look at, he says, what do you think of my servant Job? And Hasatan goes, well, you give him everything. He says, no, but he's a tzaddik. He goes, no, he's not. He's just that way because you spoil him. He said, well, fine, take that all the way. We'll see. And what did Job show himself to be? A tzaddik. Okay? You see this with Joseph. Joseph didn't give in to the temptations. Joseph didn't have an attitude problem. Joseph didn't, when the woman went to, he ran from her. I mean, you see a lot of righteous stuff going on. But Noah said he was righteous in his generation. He was a tzaddik. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean that tzaddik has no evil inclination. Scripture actually tells us all have fallen short, all sin, etc. I'm just telling you from a Jewish sort of perspective, okay? That there's one per generation or so many per generation, depending on which sect of Judaism you're talking to. But I'm just giving you that when John is talking to those of a community that would have understood what a tzaddik is, he says, this is a tzaddik, Yeshua, a tzaddik, okay? So he's using a term they would have understood very clearly. Does that make sense? All right.
All right. Olivier and Janet Hoffman, Rabbi, 1 John 1, verse 7, when it says, if you walk in the light, you have fellowship with one another, does this mean we first need to be vertically aligned and love Abba, Father, to be able to love one another?
No, you work on both at the same time. Okay? And you'll recognize that you are not perfect in both, in different ways, and you'll keep working on both at the same time. This is why Yeshua said, I do not ask you to take them out of the world, but have them not be of the world. Because you have to learn both at the same time. You're here, or even if you're on live stream, right? You're here because you're trying to learn both, okay? That's why he has feasts, so that you can learn both. You have to learn how to love each other and love him. Okay, what else?
All right, it's from Steve. Can Rabbi explain further why 1 John chapter 2, verse 7 says, no fresh command, but in 1 John 2:8 says, I write for you a fresh command? Right.
What he's trying to say is, look, I'm guessing here as far as the way he's using the language and the metaphors. He's saying, look, I'm not writing you something you shouldn't know, but I'm refreshing it. I'm going to say it out again to kind of bring it to your memory. I'm going to throw this out there so that you hear it, okay? This is also like when Peter says, I'm going to, as long as I'm in this flesh suit, I'm going to keep stirring up by reminder things that you should already know. Okay? And so he's saying, look, I'm going to say something here. He says, verse 7 said, I write no fresh command to you, but an old command which you have had from the beginning. The old command is the word which you've heard from the beginning. And then he goes, and again, I write to you a fresh command, which is true in him and in you, because the darkness is passing away. So what he's doing is he's giving you an aspect that maybe you hadn't thought of also. You haven't thought of the fact that, yes, the Torah, which was from the beginning, has to do with also understanding that if you hate your brother while you claim to be of the other side in the light, you're still in the darkness. So I'm giving you a fresh insight. Call it that. I'm giving you an insight on something that you had from before. This is old, but I'm going to give you a new way of looking at it. Maybe that would be a better way of doing it. I remember I was working many, many years ago, and a motivational sales training guy came into town, and our company decided to promote an event he was having. And I had some guys in the office, I heard them saying, I'm sure I've heard all that stuff before, so I don't think I'm going to go. I said, I certainly hope you've heard it all before, otherwise this guy would be no good. If he's got a new thing that nobody's ever heard of before, it's probably junk. What you're hoping is that he'll say it in a fresh way that'll wake you up to start doing whatever it is that he's teaching. You shouldn't be hearing anything you don't know. That's scripture also. A lot of places you see where the writer is saying, I know you should know this already and be established in the present truth, blah, 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 but I know that you also might need to hear it again because you're maybe not doing it. I don't go to, and I've heard and read and studied every possible motivational stuff that's out there. And when I pick up new ones, I am absolutely expecting to never hear anything I've never heard before. I'm only expecting to hear a new way of putting it that might spark somebody. Does that make sense? Because then I'll have more techniques to say the same thing in a different way, but I'm still saying the same thing, hoping that whichever finally I'll hit a way that lights up a light bulb for you. That's why somebody will go listen to somebody else say exactly the same thing I've said, and they'll go, oh, wow, no. I'm like, I've said that also. Yeah, but they said it differently. Just like you don't use a hammer when you need a screwdriver, okay? Different, but you're still trying to accomplish the same thing, okay, if you're building whatever you're building. Now, I could take a nail and use a hammer. I could take a screw and a screwdriver, and I can still attach the thing together that I'm attaching. And so he's saying, look, this is a truth. It's not new. It's old, and you know it, but I'm going to hopefully give you a new way of seeing it. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to freshen up the way you may be thinking about it. Is that fair? Okay, go. Next.
All right. Klein Family says, at 1 John 2, you mentioned Yeshua's switch, giving himself for us due to the sin's world. Though he knows the beginning and end, do you think Elohim was considering of taking us at that time?
Okay, one more time. I don't think I followed that.
Yeah. At 1 John chapter 2, you mentioned Yeshua's switch, giving himself for us due to this world sins.
Right.
Though he knows the beginning from the end, do you think Elohim here was considering of taking us at that time?
Okay, so I didn't understand how the question ended up at the end, although I knew what you were talking about. Look, I believe that, and it goes back to my little bedtime story I tell about how in the beginning, and I taught that as part of these teachings. In the beginning, I think the father and the son had a conversation. I picture it as the son saying, hey, Dad, I want to make something. A universe with people and a planet with all this stuff. And that, the father said, oh, okay, but if they don't do all the things, because you give them free will and all this stuff, if they don't do things according to whatever, we don't want them living forever. And they say, okay, well then fine, we'll give them a limited life where if they sin, they can die. He said, but I still want to be able to live with them forever. And they go through this whole process of saying, because remember, the father knows the end from the beginning, and saying, look, for this to work, this is being slain before the foundation of the earth. You're going to have to agree, and I'm going to have to be willing to let you die substitutionarily for them, or it won't work. Okay, and so that's what's being discussed here, is that Yeshua understood from the beginning that what he wanted would only work if he was willing to die as part of that plan. All right? So hopefully that answers that to some degree. Anyway, go ahead.
All right, you might have recovered this, but from Olivia and Janet Hoffman. Rabbi, 1 John chapter 2, verse 2, when it says, for all the world, since not everybody in the world is walking in light, Yeshua's atoned for everyone because he desired to save everyone, but the decision is on us.
Right, this goes back to the Are You Saved teaching, where salvation was made available to everybody at the same time, instead of doing it over and over again individually as people come to a place where they understand things. But now it's about taking advantage of what was made available to you. Okay?
Same question, or a similar question for them. So, Rabbi, can we be misled thinking we are walking in light, we are walking in darkness, other than praying and meditation on the scriptures? Is having our spouse for accountability a good idea?
Well, listen, spouses should be your first line of accountability, but ladies or men, whichever spouse you are, don't take that as putting you in a position where you're now in a very corrective, leadership role of usurping anything that should be there. But you should be the first line of each other. You love each other. You should be there as mirrors for each other, but do it in a loving way. All right? But you both should be under a leadership covering where you can check to make sure that you're not going in a wrong direction or wrong conclusion, because the last thing either one of you wants to do is correct the other one on a halachic point, I'm talking about specifically, and then be wrong. Because if you correct them and you're wrong, now you're really in trouble. Both of you are in trouble. to whatever degree, okay? So just be careful with that. What you may want to do is halachically notice something in your spouse and say, we may want to go find out more about this. I think we may have a problem here. Does that make sense? You know, spouse, you see the other spouse. I'm not going to guess if it's husband or wife, whichever way it's going. But if the one sees something in the other's walk, rather than point it out and then correct it and then stand in like authority, say, hey, I think there's something going on here that might not be exactly right. We probably should go get some counsel on it. Okay?
That's it from online.
All right, cool. Yes. Okay, Rabbi Tom?
Thank you. A few minutes ago, you were talking about Yeshua giving us a different perspective on the scriptures.
Yes.
Different way to look at it. And I was reminded of Matthew 7:28 and 29. It came to be when Yeshua had ended these words that the people were astonished at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one possessing authority and not as the scribes.
Amen. They were starting to recognize that he was a prophet, because prophets were ones who spoke with authority, different than the teachers or the regular leadership, but that he was speaking as one who had authority. And authority, what we see from Scripture, is part of the definition of a prophet, is one who speaks the word of Yah with a very specific level of authority. Okay? And so the people were starting to say, oh, he's not just a guy who's running around with a bunch of students, as there were many teachers running around with students. Here's somebody who has a real authority. Okay? Amen. All right, so I think that's going to wrap it up. Sarah Beth just went up to get the children from upstairs, so we're going to start to wrap things up here. Well, that was hopefully a very helpful teaching for everyone. I think it's a really important thing that we did on darkness and light. And it's very strange to think of 15 as one of my shorter teachings. Okay, so, all right, but at least we got 15 parts at it. I think we did a real thorough job. I apologize for rushing through the last few verses, but I think because we built the foundation, those verses were meant to be ones that when you heard them, you go, oh, I see how that fits into all of this. Okay? And so when you go back and listen to it again, you'll get this pause. You can pause a little bit of time on those and go, oh, so that's what he was talking about here. All right? How in Isaiah, in the latter days, Jacob was going to come and walk in the light. Okay, after walking in darkness for so long, and that, we are to put off the works of darkness and put on the armor of light, and how the enemy has blinded the minds of the unbelieving so that they don't receive the enlightening at this point of the word. By the way, this must be clear for everyone out there. I am not saying that anybody that doesn't get this is doomed, condemned. There's a plan. Go listen to the other teaching, Millennium and Kingdom. It explains all that. It's all his choice, his timing. He has a plan. I am not concerned, as Christians are generally concerned, I'm not concerned about a whole bunch of massive amounts of people doomed because somehow they didn't get some piece of the message. That is not our job. That is not our problem. That's his, and he has a plan. Okay? And I believe, according to his plan, since it is his desire that all men be saved, it will be possible for most people to be saved. Okay? Now, we also know that they're not all going to make the choices, but I think the vast majority will make the right choices when given the choice between light and darkness, between life and death, as Moses is teaching us in Deuteronomy 30. Okay, so we have those things laid out. Listen to the teaching on Millennium and Kingdom. I go into that pretty clearly.